I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak, and also to thank all of you for coming. There was a similar event 2 days ago, which was more colorful. So today we are going to be more serious. Now I'm going to talk about fair wages and employment. And now if you look back at the olden days, in the old days most people work in the countryside. They plant crops and they rear animals, and they can make a living. They can raise a family. Life was simple and relatively free of stress. They don't have to worry about getting a job. Today, most people live in the city, and getting a job is very important. Without a job, how do they earn wages to pay the bills? And the bills are a lot. What kind of bills? Mortgages for your home, food, clothing, school fees, medical fees, even transport fare. So without wages, most people will be very stressful. Now getting a job is one thing, but earning a wage that is sufficient is another thing. And we have got many workers who are not earning enough to raise a family, and they therefore have to work very long hours. They have to do 2 jobs. On the way here, normally I take a bus. I find taking a bus very good, but on the way here I was in a hurry, so I took a taxi. And the taxi driver was doing a job, working in the small enterprise, not earning enough, so he has to do taxi driving as a second job. And there are many people who are not earning enough, and they have to do 2 jobs just to make a living. Now Singapore is supposed to be one of the highest per capita income in the world, and yet our workers, many of them are finding their wages not enough for the cost of living. Why is this so? That's because in Singapore we have a very wide disparity between the high and the low income earners. And why is this important? Those people who earn high salaries, they can afford to pay more for their houses, pay more for their cars, pay more for goods and services. And this will check up the price for the prices that have to be paid by everybody else. And that's why in the country where you have high disparity of wage between the high income earners and the low income earners, the problem is more serious. And you know that in Singapore, our disparity is probably the worst in the world. We are worse than America. We are maybe as bad as China. So this high disparity is a big problem. The solution is to give a minimum wage so that the minimum wage is enough for anyone working a full day to take care of the cost to raise a family. Now many countries have a minimum wage. Singapore is one of the few countries that don't have a minimum wage. And it's important for us to fight for a minimum wage for all workers. Now we all know that some jobs pay so low that Singaporeans don't want to do those jobs. That's because we don't have a minimum wage. If we have a minimum wage, all these jobs will pay better. And Singaporeans would not mind to do the job of being a cleaner, or being a security guard, if the wages are kept higher, then we don't have to depend upon foreign workers, and we don't have to have too many people being taxi drivers. So we do need to have a minimum wage. Now I want to share with you what I observed the last 5 years. I visited Jakarta, Indonesia regularly. 5 years ago, the workers in Jakarta, the lowest wages salary earned was about $120 a month. But I find that the people there seem to be quite happy. And the reason is the cost of living in Indonesia is also low. So it doesn't matter you have low wages if the cost of living is low. Of course, Indonesia has made good progress the last 5 years. Today, the minimum wage is $250, which is twice of what it was 5 years ago. And the recent increase in minimum wage occurred when they elect a new governor for Jakarta. And the new governor raised the minimum wage by 40% 2 years ago. Of course, some businesses complain they can't survive, but other businessmen were quite supportive. They say we need to give our workers an adequate wage, otherwise they cannot live in Jakarta. Now, of course, after giving a wage of 40% 1 year, what happened next year? The second year, the labor union, the workers, want another 40% increase. But the governor says no. We already have raised the wage to an adequate level. You don't expect this kind of increase. And he is a man of courage, and he's a man of leadership. He knows what is right, and he can say we must raise the minimum wage to an adequate level. But he also knows when to say no, so that it doesn't harm the economy. So whenever we hear in Singapore, some people who say if you allow this 1 year, people will ask for high increase subsequent years. This is a sign of a poor leader, a leader who hasn't got moral courage to do what is right. So I want to quote this example to say that we do have in other countries leaders who are able to do what is right and to know how to say no. Now, besides the minimum wage, we must also make sure that there are adequate jobs. Our Singapore economy is doing well, so there are more than adequate jobs. But our problem is the immigration, the large-scale immigration that is causing a lot of disruption. Besides making sure we have adequate jobs, we must also make sure that the inflow of foreign workers is controlled. And Singapore has been rather bad the last few years, and we should not repeat that mistake. Now, in any competitive economy, and we are in a global competitive economy, there will be businesses that fail. And when businesses fail, workers are retrenched. And when workers are retrenched, it will take sometimes 1, 2 years or a bit longer to find another suitable job. And what happens when workers are retrenched and they are looking for a job, they still need to pay the bills. They still need to feed the family. So in many developed countries, they do have unemployment insurance. This unemployment insurance will give the retrenched workers something to live on. for the time that they are looking for another job. Of course, we here in Singapore, unemployment insurance is bad because people will be lazy and they will abuse the system. Some people will abuse the system, but the majority will not. Majority of people want to find proper jobs. And the countries that have unemployment insurance, they are not stupid people. The leaders are not stupid people. They know how to manage the abuse. So they have people who assess who are qualified and who are not. And they just recognize the problem and manage it. So it's also time for us in Singapore to recognize the need for unemployment insurance. And the unemployment insurance does not mean you get paid for doing nothing for the rest of your life. In countries with unemployment insurance, they only pay for 12 months. Some may pay for 18 months, but it's not permanent for the rest of the life. So if we are not retrenched, we never know the hardship. But if we are retrenched, or if we know of people who are retrenched, we know the hardship, and it is important to have a system to take care of this problem, at least for an interim period. My last point is about national service. For a long time, I have written that national service is harmful for the males of Singapore. Now, I want to make clear, we do need a strong defense, but it does not mean the burden should be carried by just the male Singaporeans. And the result of this unfair treatment is becoming more and more serious today. We hear about employers who prefer to employ foreign workers because they are not required to be called up for reservist training or remedial training. Now, the people who are called up regularly for this additional duty find that their work are disrupted, and their employers may also not like the disruption. So there is a preference to go for foreigners and other people who don't have the national service obligation. Our national service is 2 years full-time, but for most people it can mean they enter the workforce delayed by 3 years. The reason is they have to wait to be called up a few months, and after their ROD they have to wait for a few months to go for their further study. So you take a look at the males entering the workforce, compare with those who do not need to do national service. It is usually a delay of 3 years. A delay of 3 years is a serious disadvantage. Countries that still have national service or conscription, they don't train their soldiers for 2 years. Some countries train them only for 8 months. Some for 12 months. And that's enough to give training to our male citizens, can reduce the full time to 1 year. Also, we don't need to keep reservists to be trained for 10 to 12 years. If we reduce the reservists by half to 5 years, we still have adequate reservists to be called up when an emergency arises. So therefore, by keeping our national servicemen reservist training for so long, is very harmful to our male citizens, and it is one of the problems that needs to be addressed. Now, the role of any government is to make sure that the people have a good standard of living. In Singapore, we do have too many people that are highly stressed because they are not earning enough, they are unsure of a job, and when they lose their job, they are in big financial difficulties. So I'd like to ask you to support the call to have minimum wage in Singapore, to have unemployment insurance, and also to reduce the burden of national service on our male citizens. I hope you agree, and thank you for listening.